Welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. This week, I'm your host. My name is Trisha Friedman, and we are reconnecting with a former guest, Dr. Elsa Friis, from Alongside, our summer series partner. Alongside is a pioneering youth mental health company, and they're revolutionizing preventative support in schools through thoughtfully designed AI. Elsa is going to share the insights into how Alongside's AI-powered platform, which is informed by licensed mental health professionals like her, how it provides confidential and accessible support for students managing everyday challenges from friendships to stress management. So if you are here for a great conversation about what it means to totally think differently about AI as an asset for us in working towards better mental health in schools, I think Elsa's insights are going to inspire you. I know for sure that they have inspired me. So stay tuned as Dr. Friis also helps us debunk some common myths about AI in mental health and how she provides insights from recent research. And she tells us more about the continued, just incredibly relentless pursuit of new learnings she and the full team at Alongside are working on. Please welcome to the Shifting Schools podcast, Dr. Elsa Friis. Elsa, it's such a joy to be speaking with you again. I have loved following the journey of Alongside. We spoke, I think it was about a year and a half ago, and Alongside as an organization has grown. Listeners, if you've been listening to us this summer, you maybe know a little bit about them. But Elsa, I'm wondering if you can refresh folks' memory and give us that elevator pitch, if you will, about what Alongside does, and then maybe talk a little bit about your role with the company.
Fantastic. First of all, thank you so much for having me back. It's great to chat with you again. And Alongside is a youth mental health company that provides tier 1 mental health support. And for those of you not familiar with the MTSS system, what that basically means is we are providing preventative support. So we are handling those daily challenges, like how do I study for a test? How do I resolve a conflict with a friend? Or even how do I make new friends, which we know are those really foundational building blocks to positive mental health. In addition, we're going to identify kids who need more support. And as our name suggests, our goal is to really work alongside school teams, counseling teams, and student services teams to help make their job easier by providing that preventative support, and then identify and connect those kids who need more care with school supports.
And I think sometimes people's concept of what AI might do with mental health is they've maybe heard of or experimented with themselves. I am going to ask ChatGPT for some advice. And of course, I feel like that couldn't be further from the reality of your work. And also maybe reassuringly that Alongside has people with a lot of experience and expertise. So can you talk about, we're not talking about what maybe is more the layperson's experience with, oh yeah, my cousin uses ChatGPT for their mental health. This is not what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yes. So I myself am a licensed clinical psychologist, and all of the content in Alongside is created by licensed mental health professionals who have decades of experience working with teens and with youth across the country. And so what we've done is we've really taken our knowledge base and our training and said, hey, this is the knowledge base that we want the AI chatbot to work off of. So GPT is working off of the internet, right? That's the knowledge base they're pulling from. Our knowledge base is actually designed and developed by clinicians. Clinicians have also developed exactly how the pacing goes, how the chatbot responds. And so it feels like that kind of warm coach who's actually there, who's listening, but we know that information is reliable. And then the AI is also our safeguard. Our AI is the way that we are able to monitor and ensure if a kid is talking about something more serious, that we are identifying that student and making sure that we're directing them to in-person care.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about a school's experience, because what you're describing in terms of this being an additional support for folks who perhaps have not been in classroom or have not been in a school for a while, the reality is schools and classroom teachers are tasked with doing so much to look after so many people. In many ways, it's almost an impossible responsibility to be aware of some of the indicators that maybe somebody is struggling. And I even think about sometimes as an adult, I miss my own signals of, hey, like maybe you need to give yourself a break, or just that awareness can be very difficult for self, let alone 30 other young people. Can you talk a little bit more about the practicality of what Alongside can do to support educators, families? How does that actually work? What does that look like in practice?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, we're hearing from our school partners that 90% of the time, we don't even have the optimal student to counselor ratio. So, most of our schools have a student to counselor ratio of above 350 students per one counselor. Having worked in schools myself, that is just overwhelming. There is no way that we can correctly identify or even have the time to eat lunch, much less talk to all the students that we would love to support. So, one way that we are doing that is we're helping to identify those kids who aren't seen or heard. And so, this is especially coming out for some schools that a lot of times are more quiet, perfectionistic kids have a lot going under the surface. So, I think of one school that I have permission to share a brief story about. This one school, we were able to identify one of their students who was being sexually abused and also had thoughts of harming their family. And this was a straight A, never identified kiddo who no discipline referrals, not on anyone's radar, but was going through something incredibly horrific at home. And by having that confidential space, was able to put into words what was going on, and we were able to get them connected to care. The other way that we see partners really talking about the benefit or the use of Alongside is in the classroom and keeping kids in the classroom when they are having a hard day or maybe exhibiting some disruptive behaviors. So that kid I always just picture that kid like throwing the pencil in the classroom or doing something that makes you want as an adult, like to pull your hair out and be like, oh my gosh, could you please just be quiet for 1 second? Those teachers are able to also direct those students to say, hey, why don't you just take a 5-minute timeout, chat with Kiwi on Alongside, who is our chatbot, and see if you can help self-regulate. And so what we're hearing is we're seeing less discipline referrals. We're seeing kids staying in class. And we're also seeing increase in attendance rates. So it's getting easier for kids to go to school and to engage productively in their studies.
And I know, Elsa, last time we spoke, you had talked about these much shorter interventions, because I think our mental concept for therapy is often like a 55-minute session. And this has really stuck with me that you said there is actually a lot of research that shows sometimes we don't need the almost hour. It can be a brief check-in, a brief reset. Would you say a little more for the listener who's thinking, wait a second, 5 minutes? Really? That's going to make a difference?
Absolutely. So I would encourage listeners out there to check out some of the research on what's called single session interventions. And so specifically, a great researcher to check out is Dr. Jessica Schleider and her work at Northwestern University. She's really been a pioneer in these single session interventions that are delivered digitally. And so she took and found We have around 3 decades of research around single session interventions delivered by a human that they can actually make those small changes. And a lot of that has to do with instilling hope that you can change. So, one of the biggest blockers to positive mental health or to making a positive change is just the belief that like things could get better. So, if we can instill hope, and then if we can give you one small tangible thing to do to make an action, that can lead to that cascade of all of a sudden future behaviors where we're continuing to take small actions to improve the situation that we're in. And actually, compared to a longer session, sometimes in those longer sessions, everything gets muddled up, right? It's now I got to fix this and I got to fix that and I got to work on this and I have to talk to this person. So, actually constraining it to that one small thing can be really helpful from a behavioral change standpoint.
I love that you're referring to another researcher as pioneering because this is very much how I see you and your team. You recently released a huge research report. You and your team had this webinar that's still available. The link to it is in the show notes. And it's fascinating. So I don't want to spoil the whole report or the whole webinar, but I'm wondering if you might talk about some of the research that you've done that seems to be eliciting the strongest response. When you share this with people, they're like, oh, maybe I need to dig a little bit deeper or check some of my assumptions. Does something come to mind when I say that?
Oh, yeah. I was just speaking at the National Charter School Conference down in Orlando, and I actually had the opportunity to ask a group of educators, what do you think is the most common challenge that kids are going to be talking to us on alongside about? And no one got it. So it was bullying, it was friendship, it was like test anxiety, the top three, which we all found kids are struggling with. But the top two was balancing all the activities and life stress that they have going on. And something that I found was really surprising was we found that for every single age and grade group. So we work with kids in 4th through 12th grade. And previously, even last year, we found really it was more the high school students who started to really feel the pressure of how do I balance work and activities and friends and schoolwork and trying to apply for college and all of those things. And this year, our poor little 4th graders were also sharing that. And so I think it really calls for this need that one, we need to recognize that. I think as adults, a lot of times we say, wait till you have the responsibility of being an adult. Like it's going to be really hard. But we need to come from a place of empathy, but also building those soft skills. Like, how do I prioritize? How do I say no? How do I set a schedule for myself at a younger and younger age is what we're seeing.
And I wonder how much that coming to surface is a direct result of some of the anonymous aspects to what you're doing, because I think about my own use of generative AI and how if I'm like trying to fix something around the house, I probably would be like too embarrassed to ask at the hardware store. But because like I can ask several times and it's anonymous and I can be like, no, really, I don't understand this. Like, really explain it like I'm 5 because with this topic, mentally I am. Do you feel like some of the revelations are coming because like it's human behavior? We either sometimes don't want to burden people with other things, or maybe we underestimate, oh, actually, like this is something that everybody struggles with, but we don't
Yeah,
talk about it. So I feel like I can't voice it.
absolutely. And some of our students even mentioned that I know I'm not the only one struggling with this, so I don't want to burden my friends with it too. Like they're stressed out, so I don't want to talk about how stressed out I am as well. And so I think there is that element in there, absolutely. And some other things that come up that students have said is they feel like adults aren't going to take them seriously. So I think what we're hearing from them is they're worried that they're going to dismiss their concerns. They're going to have that response of, You're fine. It's not that hard. Just get over it. And oops, can I start that one over again?
Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it. No
I
problem.
was like, my brain just stopped working. Okay. What was the question? Sorry.
The anonymity, does that allow people to ask things that otherwise we wouldn't even know you were worried about this?
Yes. Okay. Awesome. I really do think the anonymous nature of this gives us an additional look into some insights on what might be going on below the surface. And so what we do hear from students is, one, they're afraid of talking to adults about this because they're going to be dismissed. They're also saying, I'm not super comfortable talking to some of my peers about this as well, because they're also going through the same struggles and they don't want to be that additional burden and they don't want to feel like they're adding on to that stress. And we've also seen a lot of other topics come out, I think, because of that confidentiality. And the third most common topic was relationships in the report. And almost half of those students talked about wanting to find a partner, someone to date. I was interested in someone. And so they love talking in this confidential space about that, because that is something that maybe they don't want to tell their friends. They definitely don't want to tell their parents. And so that also gives us an opportunity to do a lot of education around healthy dating practices, red flags, and how do you navigate your first relationship.
As you're mentioning that, it dawns on me that, of course, you have your PhD, you have all of this experience. And I'm thinking about the New York Times published this piece on professional chefs using AI. And for some of them, it was this idea of, I really needed something just totally left field that I would not have thought about. And I might not have used that idea, but that process has made me a better chef. Like it maybe got me out of a creative rut, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what you're describing, it almost sounds like there's this real potential for AI to help mental health practitioners also get better at their practice, have access to insight that they might not otherwise. And I wonder if that feels like an accurate characterization for your experience and your career journey.
Absolutely. I always feel like bouncing ideas off of something or someone, that what am I missing is so incredibly important. And I can actually speak a little bit more directly to that, in that we actually launched our Alongside for Educators this spring. And so what's been really fun is to see how educators and counselors and social workers are also using this confidential platform to do a little bit of what you were saying. One of the big challenges facing education right now is we also have a very large number of newer provisionally licensed teachers. So I think about when I was 21 and I was working at a group home in Baltimore, I didn't know how to engage. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to manage a classroom. I was like a child myself. And so what we're seeing is, in Alongside for Educators, we are that kind of digital sounding board. They're like, what do I do? How do I work through this? We also can provide advice, but they are also, similar to students, opening up about stuff that might not feel as comfortable to open up about with a professional in the room. So talking about divorce, talking about really personal issues that they're working through, that they're trying not to bring into the classroom and bring into their work. But we know that you can't just leave who you are at the door when you walk through. You're human, and that's what actually makes us so amazing and able to connect with students, is our human element, that we're also struggling and learning and growing.
It totally makes sense to me, because I think in many ways schools are like the most intensely human workplace, perhaps, of all careers. And this is something that educators talk a lot about, is prioritizing your own well-being is a difficult thing to do, because also sometimes it's collegial relationships where you're trying to figure something out, but I can't talk to this person because of the politics of that's that person's best buddy. Again, what you're really doing with Alongside is, I think, writing a totally different narrative and script for using technology to be more human. with one another. And I'm willing to bet, because I know AI and all technology is often a very polarizing conversation for folks.
Absolutely.
Definitely is right now. So I'm wondering, what is a myth that you find yourself having to debunk in conversation, or just maybe a misunderstanding about what you're doing and your approach?
Yeah, I think a big myth is that all technology is created equally in many ways, and that AI products like alongside are just GPT with a wrapper around it. I've seen on LinkedIn a ton that are like, I typed this into GPT and it didn't respond like a therapist and it didn't diagnose me correctly and it didn't do this. And I turn and say, GPT wasn't developed for that. That's not, that's, it doesn't have the data. It doesn't have the training. That's not what it was supposed to do. So why are we expecting it to do a job it was not created for? And so I think because AI feels so real, we expect it to do anything that a human could. But it's helpful to remember that just like I have a lot of training as a psychologist and other people do not, like you don't expect a non-psychologist to provide therapy. So moving a little bit the narrative away from this blanket statement of all AI is bad when it doesn't do the job it wasn't created to do, I think is really helpful. I think it's also really important, though, that we do take a really close look at the safety and the efficacy of these new programs. I think parents need to be taking a very close look at things like Tollin or other large AIs that are out there right now. And so I think it is that balance. We need to question, we need to use our reasoning and our logic. And that is so incredibly important. We can't just blindly trust AI.
Yeah. And I think also when you're talking about offering something that is meant to help a certain audience, what role do they play? And I really appreciate actually all of the engagement that you make sure that you embed from the actual audience that you're hoping to serve. Can you give us an example of what I'm talking about there?
Absolutely. So we run an amazing high school internship program. And so we have high school students who are directly involved in creating alongside. We also have an amazing partner community advisory board. So we have educators, principals, director of social services who are helping us create and ensure that we are working alongside of those teams, that it's something that kids want to engage with, but is also something that's incredibly safe and is fulfilling its intended purpose.
As I reflect on the research report that you've done recently, that again, anybody can go download, read, it also dawns on me that a lot of the work that you're doing is very much in the zeitgeist. This has been a year where I think in part directly related to Netflix's adolescence, a lot of folks are talking about boys. What are we doing to support boys? The loneliness epidemic. A lot of the things that we are socially worried about are also very much related to your research. Can you talk a little bit more about, I'm just willing to bet you maybe after adolescence boomed on social media, we're seeing a lot of the hand wringing and the hopelessness almost. I feel like sometimes people are like, the problem is too big. And it's actually people are working on this.
People are working on this. And one piece of data that I'm really proud of is we see pretty equal engagement between our male, female, and non-binary students, which is really speaks to how much, no matter your gender, how much you want that confidential space to really talk about things. And we did see some gender differences that are pretty minor, honestly. Boys tended to talk a little bit more around balancing sports in school versus balancing friends in school. But they were just as common to talk about issues with sleep, issues of conflict with friends, the lack of motivation that they're experiencing, or difficulties with focus and procrastination. So I think part of this is it is incredibly easy to get overwhelmed at the youth mental health crisis, the loneliness epidemic, all of these things. But what I will say is that kids are open to support. They are seeking it out. Boys are seeking out support just as much as girls are when we're providing that opportunity. And so I think it's important that we shift the narrative away from this alarmist to, if we just pause and take that moment and start that conversation, we at the individual level can have a really important impact on students' lives.
In relation to that confidentiality piece, I'm wondering if you might respond to, I sometimes get this reaction where I work with a lot of adult learners, and there's a course that I just finished up where I had a bespoke chatbot for the adult learners going through the course. If they wanted to ask a question about the assignment or course material, and I didn't say, hey, don't email me. Of course, write me. Right. But if you want to check in with this bot, go for it. And a lot of folks were like, oh, that's really cool. But I did have a few educators say, that's interesting. I don't know if I would want to offer that, because I think my feelings would be hurt if I felt like one of my students didn't want to come to me first. And I was a little surprised by that, because I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I could see that. But at the same time, I also would imagine, like, you want that feedback, you want that answer right now. But also, I don't know, like, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if somebody wants to ask a bot for help before they want to ask me. And I wonder if, in your experience, there is something with human nature about sometimes actually we do really just want a confidant who is not going to know that I misunderstood an instruction. Can you say a little bit more about that piece?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think even as adults, this concept of shame and feeling shame and being worried, it drives so many of our interactions. I think if anyone listening just pauses and thinks, even if I had a text message that I just forgot to respond to, and then I'm like, oh God, do I respond a week later or not? That is that feeling of like paralyzed shame and fear about, am I going to be judged, that I think everyone fears. And if we look at adolescents developmentally, I think our job is to help them slowly learn how and when to ask for help. When you go to college, you're not going to have someone peering over your shoulder. So I think it's actually a super helpful skill for students to learn about, how do I send that email? How do I reach out? And what we have found is that 41% of students who are completing these chats and getting, at the end, every chat ends with a little summary. 41% of the time, they're choosing on their own to send that to their school counselor or social worker. And so what we're also helping is saying, let's create an easy way for you to communicate. So maybe they don't want to go into the intricacies around the conflict with the friend, because they don't really want to share that with an adult and they feel like it's more important they keep that confidential. But they want someone to know that they're struggling and maybe need that tiny bit more help. We're trying to help facilitate that, both in sharing those summaries, and we also have different chat modules or topics that really focus on breaking down how to reach out for support.
It's just, again, it's so inspiring to see what you've done. In my mind, it feels like it's happened very quickly. I don't know if that feels like it's the same to you. And I would venture to guess that also feels like very motivational, is alongside looking at other sort of research questions. Or are there other wonderings for you personally about, okay, where do we take this next? Or what is this going to mean in terms of us thinking broadly about the system and how we're seeing this as a driver for academic benefits? What else are you thinking about in the mid to short to long term? What are some of the questions you're thinking we might also be able to look into this?
Absolutely. So we just wrapped up a quasi-experimental trial with a school district in Texas. And so I am super excited. So stay tuned. Be on the lookout for some results from that. And in that trial, we're also going to be looking at the potential impacts on disciplinary referrals, attendance, and academic outcomes as well. And so going beyond how do we help support intervened hopelessness, go beyond supporting positive mental health. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also really excited about the potential impact that we're going to have on educators and how that can trickle down into both staff burnout, reducing staff burnout, but also how that might be able to change some of those daily interactions with kids. Because we know if you're feeling all burnt and crispy and not the best, it's really hard to be present. And the more that we can facilitate those positive, genuine interactions in the classroom, in the school, in the hallways, we know that is so important for creating that emotional security and also the learning environment where students are really able to thrive.
Elsa, final question. For a listener who's thinking, I wonder if we can bring Alongside into our school, into our district, what usually happens when a partnership is initially being formed or somebody is saying, wow, actually, I would love to do something quasi-experimental with Alongside. What are next steps? And walk me through, I'm guessing you also have some early conversations with those leaders about the options that can be put in place.
Absolutely. So please check out our website, alongside.care. And there is information there on how you can reach out to us. And what we love to do is just start with a conversation, right? And so it might be at the building level with a principal or the team at the building level or at a district level. We're open to both. And that conversation is really going to be what's going on, what are you feeling, what are your main goals, and then how we can facilitate that. As we continue to grow, we're now able to support universal mental health screening to identify kids who are at risk. We're able to provide that tier 1 mental health support. So those help building the skills to manage daily challenges, and then also providing educator support. So I think it really starts with a conversation.
I love that. Again, listeners, all of those links will be over there in the show notes. Elsa, I look forward to continuing to follow the journey. And I just really appreciate the documentation and archive of research that's being shared as well. Really, in closing, if you were going to point people to one other thing that Alongside has done to tell the story of what you're doing, is there anything else that you're saying, hey, you might want to also check out this?
Yeah, I would absolutely direct them to check out our research that we conducted with Northwestern University last year. One of the things I'm just so incredibly proud of is we're a young company. I just celebrated 3 years at Alongside, but from the very beginning, we've been working with amazing academic partners to really try to ensure that we're providing quality and evidence-based support.
Thank you so much for that. I will find that and link to it as well. Elsa, best of luck to you and the whole team at Alongside. I really appreciate your team.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, folks, thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode. I want to let you know that if this conversation has you feeling curious about the future, you can join me for a free 45-minute webinar coming up July 17th. That's going to be at 8 a.m. MDT, 10 a.m. EST, or 3 p.m. GMT. That free 45-minute webinar, July 17th, is going to be exploring futures literacy to help us better understand emerging career pathways. Futures literacy is a huge passion of mine, and I will be showing you how you can use it to better imagine multiple futures. We will dig into existing signals. These are clues about where the future world of work might be headed. And we'll also dig into some of the trends. These are evidence-backed pieces of research that show us something is shifting. If you'd like to join me for that free 45-minute webinar, you can register at www.shiftingschools.com. Hope to see you July 17th.
Hey there, dedicated listener. If you've made it this far, we know you're passionate about shifting the way education works. And Tricia and I appreciate you. If you loved what you heard today, We'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review Shifting Schools wherever you listen to podcasts. Those ratings help us reach even more educators just like you. And if you know someone who could benefit from these conversations, please share this episode with them. Just one person. Think of the impact we can make together. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for even more great content. And if you haven't already, join us at Camp Shifting Schools, where the conversations keep going long after the podcasts end. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and thank you for being part of Shifting Schools.